Okay, we are the SCTV writers, or at least the SCTV writers that were on the show, I think, the longest over the span of the 5 or 6 years the show was on the air.
Shall we say our names?
Yes, I'm Dick Lasucci.
Paul Flaherty.
Bob Dolman.
Mike Short.
Doug Steckler.
John McAndrew.
And that's it.
That's it.
That's us.
How much did we get paid for the first 25 shows?
I believe it was a whopping 7,000 Canadian.
For 25 episodes.
Is that right?
28 episodes, yeah.
Yes.
My goodness.
And I couldn't have been happier.
Right. Well, you remember
Coming
the
off of my cheap
negotiation?
musician's life, I mean, I had struck pay dirt, you know? I was trying to keep it quiet so people wouldn't hit on me, you know?
Remember the negotiation, the meeting? And the meeting said, go! Yeah, take it. But I had been working in bands too, so it was like, pay dirt.
All I remember about those first weeks was that you and I and Mike were petrified.
Right.
Just couldn't say a word. Just the idea of pitching an idea and having it bomb in front of the cast was more than any of us could bear.
That's right.
So we just sat there quaking.
Bob and John and myself come on about the same time in spring of 1981. I think that was it.
Right.
And I remember it was just so joyous because there seemed to be complete creative freedom. You're watching.
Yeah,
right?
already.
No,
that is amazing.
absolutely not.
How could you look at your watch already?
That's absolutely
We're 5 minutes
breathtaking.
into this thing.
We're going to have to be. No, we are going to have to be separated.
I didn't mean it that
Wasn't
way
there
at
a
all.
strike or
I
something?
mean it that way.
Doug, please continue.
No.
He's always articulate, which is why...
No, it was an amazing opportunity.
And bringing things we'd written to the table was terrifying. Mm-hmm. Because some of us would be teamed up. Often I wrote with something and then have to bring it to that table. And it was always like taking a test. And we'd have to present it. If we hadn't recruited the actors we wanted to read it, then we had to read it ourselves. And it was just, we were quaking. And it was what we'd written. And sometimes it would bomb and you'd just have the silence of that long table and all the faces just dropping. And then every once in a while someone would say, all right, okay, why don't you rework it? That was, right?
The highest accolade. Yeah, you could use some rework on that.
Except for Paul and myself, who were held up to great ridicule because I think you know what I'm going to propose here. We would laugh at our own material, and we would laugh at it with great vigor. Is that not right? I mean, I hope we still got that bond.
That's true. This is absolutely true.
Others.
I was laughing at my material on the way in today.
But sometimes it was the only laughter in the room. But nevertheless,
It was odd, though, what you said about the table reads were basically the cast and the writers around the table reading everything that had been written that week, I guess. And it was odd that we would read pieces ourselves and take all the parts ourselves, or to cold read. And I remember Moranis teaching me that the best way to get a scene picked is to race through it as fast as you possibly can. And that really worked, because there were a lot of 9-page scenes that we would read in about a minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Right.
And they got picked every single time. Right. People were just looking at you and amazed at how quickly you went through it.
in Edmonton, where in the wintertime it would be dark by 2:30 in the afternoon, it was an amazing, isolating experience, which I think in some ways helped our creativity. Bob, John, and myself were actually separated from the studio and some of the other writing offices and banished to this place across the, perhaps banished is too severe, but we found ourselves across the way, and we always had to do everything by phone. Can we come over? Is it okay to come over? Okay, we'll come over then. And our only contact over there was the cleaning lady, who was a bizarre woman who pounced around the room saying, "They just don't care. They just don't care. Look at the mess. They just don't care," in her Louis XV Sun King wig. At least that's how I remember her.
Do you remember Dr. Allard would come in and give us ideas?
Oh, yeah.
Ideas? Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Allard was the person that Andrew Alexander, our producer,
A billionaire.
who was financing the
Yes,
show.
right.
And the reason we all went to Edmonton is because he was from Edmonton, had a station, a building, and he was letting us use it, I assume for free or whatever it was. And so because he was financing SCTV, we wrote the show in Toronto and then flew off to Edmonton to tape the show.
We produced a small piece called frankincense. It was a parody of it was a little Frank Sinatra
Right,
doll.
I remember that.
And we had trouble, generating enthusiasm behind this idea. I went directly to Allard. I'm not boasting, for God's sakes. I don't remember how to do that. But I remember going to him personally, and him, well, that guy likes to sue. Mr. Sinatra likes to sue, but this looks okay to me. And he wrote that on the sketch.
Really?
My memory failed me entirely. That's so, isn't it?
You brought it to the cast.
I brought it to the cast.
Signed by Dr. Allard.
That's right.
He said, okay.
You remember that, Bob. We had all labored on that particular piece.
Yeah, well, that's for the Christmas show,
So
wasn't it?
you just forced it through without.
I got an appointment through his secretary, and I went into his office. And that was one way of getting a sketch on the air.
For years, he's delighted your ears. Now this Christmas, won't you let him freshen your air? Ladies and gentlemen, the perfect Christmas gift. Now as functional as it is traditional. Frankincense. Yes, Christmas is great, but oh, those household odors. Turkey stench? Not anymore. Frankincense, the ideal holiday gift. Drat that cat. What will your Yuletide visitors think? With frankincense, smelly cat odors disappear.
Yeah, I just thought of something, though, as we were talking about Edmonton, and this is true of Toronto, too. We had this table that we, the writers, would have to bring this material to. And it was always a challenge to have things read and have things approved. But that was the extent of our creative censorship, was within our own group. We never really got touched by the network, or by people outside. We were really safe up there. And I think one of the things that all of us have run into since then in other jobs is that just how free we were to do whatever we wanted. Our only judges were our peers at that table, one another, and they were all talented people we respected. So we had this world we went into every day that seemed kind of insane and difficult and challenging, but that was the end of it. We never, and even when they would come up from the executives would come up from L.A., and sit in our meetings, they would give some notes and then they'd leave and we'd just go, well, okay, what were we doing? And we'd just go back to work because we were just isolated up there and it made the show
well, what you do is
censorship, I think.
You would start, in the next show, someone would be doing those two executives that came from NBC, and then they stopped coming up because it was too embarrassing.
The box looked great beside him, Guy. He's terrific. We may want to use him as a spokesman.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Guy, listen, what movie will he be reviewing next week?
I'm not really sure right now. I don't know.
Guy, could we possibly suggest a movie for him to review if we're sponsoring the thing, of course?
I don't see why not.
Terrific.
Yeah, but it would have been a bad show if we had taken all of those corporate suggestions and tried to homogenize it. It just wouldn't have been SCTV.
Or if we'd even second-guessed ourselves by listening to notes from outside. Because some of the things we did in that show were real risks, and the comedy went in places that were completely absurd, and you couldn't see it coming, and it's because we all trusted that within the group. And when we get the notes, they say, well, this doesn't quite make sense. Why would this character do this? And that wasn't an issue for us then. Even in the bunker at across...
Did you get over that?
No, Bob, speak up, for God's sakes. Don't be silenced. This is important.
Did we talk about the bunker in Edmonton? Did we mention that? We were put in a place that was isolated from the rest of the...
It was a few feet away.
A few feet? It was a parking lot?
I always remember Toronto. I always remember the Magder Studios. I mean, you guys were right down the hall.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that was much later, but yes.
They had a nice bar down there, did they not, Dick?
This was when we moved the show to Toronto from Edmonton. Eventually, everybody said, you know what, we can't keep going back and forth, and you guys were living in Toronto, and everybody wanted to make the show based in Toronto. So we went to this place called Magder Studios out in Scarborough, which is a little suburb outside Toronto, and it was basically a film studio, though. I mean, we went from a small little production TV studio to a major soundstage, or at least a much bigger soundstage. And they had a bar at this place. There used to be many,
With very poor service, I might add.
There's also always what was remembered on the show was that it began as improvisational comedy on a stage. And even though the writers came into it, and even though all of the actors at SCTV were writers that we had either to fall back on when we did go out to shoot something, because the actors could always improvise and bring something to it, or a lot of the writing was out of improvisation, as John described. Many of the actors on the show would write very much like they wrote when they improvised on stage. They would just come up with it. So we had all this comedic ammunition. We could come from any direction, but very rarely did we write something down, hand it in, and then have it produced as it was written,
Verbatim.
if it really came from one of the characters.
Right.
Sometimes we did
Right.
pieces that required writing when we parodied commercials or something.
Yeah.
But when it was a character piece, it was usually taken, created with the character, that is the actor, and then taken further. So that draft of writing was a step in between that respected those roots always in that show.
Yeah. Well, Joe always said, give them something to play as opposed to just something to say, which is, I always remembered that.
At the end of the cycle, because we were still being paid, but we'd finally caught up to camera, right? So there would be the last 2 weeks where Andrea Alexander, the producer, I guess, says, these guys are not going to be sitting around in their duffs. They're actually going to use them as actors, right? So we would be dragooned in to perform. I remember one time playing a crown attorney or something, and I guess a hyperactive Marty, I believe. What are the odds of that? But and others like appearing like in Vikings and Beekeepers. I remember there was perhaps some number.
It was a practical Viking longboat that I think that
didn't it become a salad bar someplace after that? Honestly, I heard
no,
that.
Honestly, you're right, John. But it eventually, I think it found its way into the Klondike Days parade as a float, and then it reemerged as a salad bar.
That's right.
It was massive.
This campaign was not without inherent problems.
By the hammer of Thor, that sound strikes fear in my very entrails.
Mine too. And we are Vikings with the entrails of Thor.
Yes, think how the English will feel when the keepers of this wretched horde release their swarming terror.
With every show, you had to service each one of the members of the cast.
You didn't have to, Paul, but that's how you get a
We didn't
scene
service
on.
everyone.
That's how you get a scene on.
Cast members like Andrea and Marty really wanted the writers. I mean, they really searched out the writers and loved when they could sit down and improvise and have all that give and take with the writing. People like Catharine and Eugene, more so, I guess, like to go off on their own and maybe write a sketch, even though they worked with us, probably not to the extent that some of the others did. And Joe always, obviously, depended on...
Joe liked working with us, but we would usually go off and write the draft and then come back to Joe, and he'd work with us on the rewrite. He always had great...
Calling to tell you that I'm going to kill her tomorrow at the wedding. I think it'll be easier with all those people around and stuff.
Don't want to hear about it, Rocco.
Billy.
Billy, whatever. Now look, you just do what you have to do. And call me in about a month or two.
Check. But I'll see you tomorrow.
You won't see me tomorrow!
But you know what's great about John was to see the character that he would come up with for those things.
Oh, yeah.
What he would look like when he would show up on the set. He'd always have a good wig. Yeah. You know, usually he went for tight wigs, smaller than his actual hair, you know. And always fun. He's great at those instant thumbnail characters, you know.
That season is when he said hair. It's all about hair.
Is that what he said?
Yeah, he had figured out comedy. Hair. That was it.
There was always a running gag with him that he was light in this show, right? He was always being too light in this show. And then when you look at when it was finally assembled, it's like, the guy was all over the place. For somebody who supposedly didn't write enough sketches, he sure made his way on the camera.
You'd always cast John in a scene because he would always be funny.
Oh, yeah.
He'd always be hilarious.
Great actor. Really great. One thing about that whole cast, I thought, was that everybody played support so well and came up with these great little characters. They just weren't. They just weren't going through the motions because they had to play support. They were actually trying to find really
Sometimes that was more
characters.
fun for them too to play this little small part.
They were great. It was a great supporting role.
Hi, Mikey.
Hiya.
How's your mommy's motorcycles today?
Oh, not too bad, thanks. You know, the dry weather's really helped it out a lot.
You go to Arizona this year or no?
We don't have to now, you know. That's the great thing about it, you know, the dry weather and all.
Yeah, Mr. Anderson, is he seeing another woman?
Somebody tell me. Excuse me, Eddie.
I remember when Andrea and Marty were doing the piece you wrote with John Mellencamp.
I wrote a piece?
The Nutty Lab Assistant.
Ah, yes.
That was good.
When John was playing Boris Burgess, I think his name was, the bad guy in it. And Marty and Andrea, who had won extra takes. And John was just perfectly funny in every single one. And then finally he was leaving the set. I guess he had done it about 4 times. I'm very patient, you know. And they were the ones that kept messing up, and they kept asking for more retakes. And John was leaving. That's when he saw the stuffed parrot. Remember sitting up?
Oh, right. Yeah,
He had them bring it over. Just place that there. And he did this long little improvised bit. It was hysterical.
Come, Polly! Come, Polly! Come home, Polly! Time to go, Polly! 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 Come home, Polly! Come on.
Now, yesterday, Andrea said that she only used to do 1 take of scenes.
What?
When she was talking yesterday. She said she did 1 take.
Did she?
Squaw needs...
There's some storying going on.
Work done in the memory area.
Probably the reason that we're doing this, you know, bonus track for the DVD or whatever is that sketch comedy is the it's the writer's medium. It's not about sitcom is like you have to be likable. When you write sketch, it's the writer's milieu. It's like pointing the finger. That's unjust. That's unfair. That's wrong. That's worthy of ridicule. And I think that's that in the combination of our isolation that Bob was talking about brought out the best in all of us. And I don't know if we've done any better work since.
What I loved about it was the fact that the writers on the show and the actors were collaborators. We really were, you know. The writers are pariahs on shows. You know, they hand the stuff in, but that, you know, and then that's it. You don't hear a peep from them. You know, they might do some punch up for certain scenes and things like that, but oftentimes they're not in any sense a collaborator. But we would be able to see those scenes through right to the end. You know?
They wanted you on the floor.
Right there on the floor, and they wanted your feedback. They wanted your help. Right through the editing, the sound, you know, it was just, it was great. It was great training.
And very little rewriting when you think about it. After something went to the table and got picked, if it was accepted, very little rewriting on. When you're down here in Los Angeles or working on sitcoms, the whole thing is table rewritten by committee, and so much of it, page by page by page, gets rewritten. When something worked at our table, it kind of went into production, and once people got on the floor or whatever, we'd come up with bits here and there, just improvise some things. But most of it went as first drafts in many respects.
I remember, love seeing that little world get created. You know, like from page to sketch. Just seeing it through in its entirety. You just see that, like the Italian movie that we did. You know, the.
Rome Italian style.
Right. Just seeing that materialize and seeing it through right to the end was just always a thrill.
All day long, I've been searching the streets for a rum so perfect. Look at it. It beckons me. It tortures me. Hey, it really tortures me. Bambolina! Bambolina, I adore you.
Lazy bummer, you spend as much time looking for a job as you do looking at girls' wives. Maybe you'd make something of yourself.
There have been a lot of Canadian television parody. In fact, a lot of the shows were based on City TV, which was a little independent station up there, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of Andrea stuff. And the little local shows were based on what we saw up there. But we'd always talked about, I think we were talking about doing parodies of Canadian shows. And then Joe said, what about they go on strike? The janitors go on strike, and we have to import Canadian, which is exactly what had happened with the NFL strike.
Right.
The CFL was being, I think, broadcast down here to fill in for the NFL.
But being in Canada, we watched Canadian TV all the time. We knew all of those people.
Yeah.
And it was just, to me, the richest, deepest parody, that worked on all those levels,
Except for Americans.
Even in that sense, I think they still had to laugh at it, though.
Yeah, I would hope. But the amazing is, like, something like that idea, all of a sudden, every writer is, like, coming up with 1,000 ideas because it's, like, virgin territory.
All of us were able to come up with scenes that really worked in that show.
Yes, things you'd always wanted to get, but this was, like, the first time you're ever allowed to.
Panel, I'm afraid we can't spend any more time on this. Would you remove your blindfolds, please? And we'll continue the questioning with Austin McGrath.
That voice is so familiar. I have no idea.
Philip Morris.
And you say you're a popular Canadian actor?
Yes, I am.
Well, I'm afraid we've stumped you on this one, panel. Mystery guest, would you let the panel know exactly who you are?
A terrestrial day-active animal. The woodchuck hibernates in snowy climes.
Oh. Morley Mark of the hinterland.
Very good, Films.
Very good. I thought the election show that we did has a million
That's
ideas
when Joe's character, Vic Hedges.
Vic Hedges runs for mayor against
Right.
Tommy
And
Shanks, who's running from the mental institution. Remember,
And for some reason, the hook on Vic was that he saved everyone's life.
Saved everyone's life. From
He
Polynesian
dashes off
town.
camera.
Polynesian town. It was like he had saved Dr. John's life. He'd saved Johnny LaRue's life.
But Vic also, his smart idea was, since he had been busted, he had been arrested and all this stuff, in his own commercials about it before it came out. Somehow he thought that was a good idea, that he was going to be forthright and show footage of himself being arrested. And
Hey, I made a lot of mistakes in my personal life. And I'll probably make mistakes as mayor. But I'll tell you one thing. If I do make a mistake, you're going to know about it. Because with me as your mayor, there'll be no surprises.
Vic Hedges, because nobody's perfect.
I always like the Zontar show, just the subtle ways that I think it's Eugene is give your soul to Zontar, right? It's like Joe does the throw as Floyd, right, or something, and then Eugene is just, and then that gag that Candy has as Zontar about it. If this is on an Advent screen, everybody sit in the middle because you won't see me.
And Zontar's speech at the end that he gives about what he's telling, that there will be so many original shows and reruns.
Right, it was all based
on what Andrew had just
right.
told us what we needed to do.
How many
for
best
NBC.
ofs we'd need, right?
Zontar was left with virtually no television personalities whatsoever. Therefore, it is imperative to send your cast up to Zontar to do 1 9-show cycle, 3 best ofs.
Don't be ridiculous. You'll never get actors to go all the way to the planet Zontar.
Now, either you go along with my plan, or I shall destroy you immediately. You have 1 minute. Zontar has spoken.
So it was totally inside. It was all about what our order from NBC was supposed to be, how many reruns, original shows. And that was the speech Zontar gave to SCTV.
That touches on an important point, I think, about that show, was that even though some of the stuff was inside, like parodies that we would choose, like, you were talking about the Murder in the Cathedral or whatever, even if those aren't popular pieces, or like there actually was a movie called South Sea Sinner, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter because if the scenes were funny and the actors are great, the audience just enjoyed.
Surfed around at night, and it was so different. And it wasn't just because we worked on it. It was just a completely different take on television and comedy. It looked different. It felt different. It was just weird. And where you'd go, and when you left it, watching TV again.
I'll speak for all of us up here, and I think probably everybody was associated with SCTV. We've neglected to talk about a lot of things that went into the making of the show, like people behind the scenes, the wonderful makeup and hair people, and all the technicians, and there were so many talented people. It was this rare experience of working with a group of incredible talents who just happened to come together at the same time in the same place. And if you'd had 1 or 2 of the people in our cast, it would have been a successful show, I think, because we had such talent. To think we had all these people in one room, in one place, putting out all this material, it was a real privilege to be a part of that. And And it was laughter all day long, too. In the writing offices, we were laughing. We were with some of the funniest people on earth were working there with us. And so to be supporting them, to be supplying them with material was for me and people I collaborated with just a great experience.